All right, Ray Ferraro, exciting times here on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, right? We're introducing a new segment. We haven't quite come up with a term for it, but it's because we have such strong opinion. But sometimes that opinion needs to be balanced by fact, right? So
yeah, I guess
we dive into the world of management frequently here on the podcast. So it's important that we introduce Dave Nonis, former general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Vancouver Canucks, been around hockey for many, many years. Dave, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. And if we don't offend you too much in the first episode, then perhaps we'll have you back in another week or two.
Sounds good. I appreciate being on.
Well, let's take a look at where we're. Yeah, so far. Well, hey, you survived overdrive in Toronto, so you'll be okay. Around 20 games into the NHL regular season, all right? So, we spend a lot of time focusing on the negative, and I know that's shocking, and I don't mean we being Ray and I, just media in general. So normally when you get to American Thanksgiving, we start looking at trade options, opportunities, the wants, the needs, the strengths, the weaknesses of each club. So if you're an underachieving team this time of year, as a general manager, is this where you're really looking at what could be available, or does that just happen day by day, just as part of what you do as a GM in the NHL, and the time of year doesn't matter?
You know what? You're always looking to see if you can find a partner, a trade partner, either for the now or for the deadline. But the reality is it's becoming harder and harder to make moves during the season. And if you're a team that is you think you're a contender, more often than not, you've spent pretty close to the cap. And I think looking, there's 16 teams that are in the LTIR right now, give or take. I think there's another 6 that are within $1 million of the cap. So to get a player from another team that's going to be a difference maker, it's really unlikely he makes $850. And so right. you need to have room to make that deal, or you have to be prepared to move a big piece of your own. So as we've seen, over the past couple of years, most teams make their bed in the off season. They hope that they have room, some flexibility to make a move at the deadline when their cap space has grown. But big moves in the first month or two of the season, those have gone by the wayside. And it used to be, part of the game. When I first started, Pat Quinn was a big proponent of let's give it 10 games. And if we're not very good, we'll make some changes. And now that's pretty hard to do. It really is. So injuries play a part. Long-term injury plays a part. But the cap really does limit moves during the season.
How much does, I'm assuming not much, but how much does noise from everywhere impact the way a management group works? Because, we just mentioned 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Doug Armstrong's St. Louis Blues had lost 8 in a row. Now they've won 7 in a row. Like, is that patience or can't make a move? Because there was all kinds of noise around the team. How do you just shut that out and just kind of do what you need to do?
Well, I think a lot of that is experience. And you just mentioned a guy that has got some experience, and he's got a lot of nerve, and he handled it, in my opinion, the right way. First of all, he doesn't have a lot of room to make changes. But he made a statement. He talked to his team and backed his coach up like he should have. It's a Stanley Cup winning coach. And he knows his roster is pretty good. Now, they weren't playing well. No doubt about that. They won their first 3 games, and I don't think they played well in those games. But they have a pretty good club. And Doug did the right thing, and he stuck with it, and they found their way out of it. Is it going to be sustainable? I mean, we'll find out. But I think experience is a big part of it, Ray. You don't want to listen. If you're in a Canadian market, it's hard not to hear it, but you do your best. And I always found that, listening and worrying about what other people were saying really wasn't helpful, because you're going to get it anyway, but try to steer clear of it if you can, because, I think poor decisions are easily made when you're listening to what the butcher has to say, or, what your children's teachers think. And that really is where you see some pretty poor decisions.
What's Tom Fitzgerald thinking right now? They've won 13 in a row. It's pretty hard to not like your team at this moment, but what are you thinking when everything comes up aces?
I think he can't wait for the next game to start. I mean, every time everything he's looking at is to turn into gold. And, I don't think anybody picked this. I mean, I don't think anyone picked them to be rolling 13 straight. I think most people thought they were going to get better. But they have really bought in, and you have to give that coaching staff credit. You have to give Tom credit. I mean, they've put together a pretty good team. They've bought in. They're not just winning games. They're winning games, by several goals. Their goal differential, I believe, is the second best in the league. And I just didn't see that coming from New Jersey. I still don't think they're going to win their division, because I think Carolina, if they get healthy, I think they'll overtake them at the end of the day. But I think they're a playoff team, and good for them. They've done a great job.
So let's go from one extreme to another. Dave Nonis joining us here on the podcast. Most hockey people would describe themselves as being very loyal. So and it doesn't happen very often, rightfully so, but when you see a coach on a hot seat, or a coach that's fired before Christmas, or even to the midway point of a regular season, where does that decision-making process come from? Is it a collection of things? I mean, is it your gut instinct, your experience? Is it pressure from senior management, pressure from ownership, the fan base, all of that? Thankfully, we don't see it very often, but this year's no different, right? There have been a couple of guys identified as being on a hot seat. How much of that is real, and how much of that is the general manager, ownership, senior management going, okay, you described earlier, it's so difficult to make a trade. We can't sit here and do nothing. We've got to do something, and a coach change can shake it up.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's been a bigger focus now than it used to be. In-season changes. Wins and losses are always going to dictate a lot of what happens in our game, but it really can't be the only thing. And Ray, you can probably talk about it from a player standpoint, but from a manager standpoint, I always wanted to see if, the phrase, did he lose the room? Are the players still trying to perform? Are practices still upbeat? Are they learning? Are the younger players developing? Those are all factors that go into it too. Yes, wins and losses are always going to be important, probably more important as this business gets bigger and the money grows and as it becomes more popular. Wins and losses are probably going to have even more of an impact, but it can't just be that. If your players have lost interest in the direction of the coaching staff, then it's time to make a change. If your younger players aren't playing or not developing, it's time to make a change. And, really what you're looking at in some cases during the season is if the coach and the manager are not on the same page. And when that's the case, then you're probably going to have some dysfunction that leaks into the dressing room. When
you say, losing the room, like, if you have a trusted leader, like somebody that you've been around a long time, that their personality, would you ask the player? I mean, nobody asked me. I was too emotional. They weren't going to ask me. I was firing guys all over the place. So, like, would you have gone to a player or two, or is it just what you sense and what you see?
It's more what you sense and what you see. I always like to be around the team fairly regularly. I think you can get a feel just by being there and being around them. You kind of know what's going on, but also I think to me it's effort and execution. And we went through my last year in Vancouver. We were I think we were 5th overall in January in the whole league, and we ended up missing the playoffs. We had a bunch of injuries that really devastated our group, but they never quit. I never thought of, I better get rid of Alain Vigneault. He was doing a very good job with what he had left on that roster. And I saw the effort and I saw them trying. And if I had stuck around, he would have stuck around too. There was no reason to get rid of the coach at that point. But at the same token, when I let Mark go, although it was after the end of the season, I felt it was time for a new voice in that room. Players had started to, again, not listen is the wrong way of putting it, but it was getting stale, and it was time for a new direction for that group. And I made the decision we had to make a coaching change.
Last one for me for this round. Anyway, we got 8,000 more questions. When everyone says, I'm always interested in this, and of course, as you know, Cammie is working with the Canucks now, but I can't ask her because she doesn't tell me anything.
No, she's not telling me.
I got no idea what the hell's going on. But when we hear like, so and so's making calls, or Dave Nonis is calling other teams, like, do you just call up Kenny Holland or Tom Fitzgerald and say, hey, what's going on? What are you looking at? What are you doing? Like, how does that, I'm always interested in I call Dregs. We talk about nothing for 15 minutes. Like,
It's true.
No, you do make calls pretty regular. You like to check in on teams and touch base every 2, 3, 4 days. You maybe call 4 or 5 teams and just rotate through. You want to see what might be out there, not necessarily what is out there. Like that, into the future, if this continues, I might be looking for something, or I might be moving something. I think some people think that deals just come up on a weekend. I'm gonna call Nashville and see if I can make a deal. Most deals are weeks or months in development, and so setting the table, as the season goes on, is important. One thing, the guys who I think that I really respect in this game, and the senior GMs in particular, you don't see them talk about what they're going to do. They're already doing it. They're already talking to other teams about what they're going to do. They're looking at, yes, I need to improve down the middle, or my back end is beat up. I don't think they need to announce it as much, but they go about trying to solve their problems quietly and effectively, and people don't hear about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll let you go with this, but I mean, an interesting transaction this past week was Tyson Jost going from Minnesota to the Buffalo Sabres via waivers, right? So is it just plainly obvious that now his contract is part of it, of course, but Billy Guerin would exhaust the market looking for a trade fit for Tyson. And when he got to the stage where he realized that, nobody's giving me anything, or I'm going to have to retain salary, I don't want to do that, all of that, then you put a player of I don't know if significance is the right word, but an interesting player nonetheless on waivers because you've run out of options?
Yeah, more often than not. I'm pretty sure he would have checked around to see if there was a trade partner. At this time of the year, even though his salary isn't huge, it's probably a little bit much to take. Yeah. I'm sure Bill thought, listen, if I get him down, maybe there is a trade at that point. When he's into the minors, sometimes it's easier to move a player. For teams got cap space, they don't mind taking that extra $1 million or $800,000 in their cap for a player that might be a really good, useful piece as a depth piece down the road. But I'm certain that he checked around to see if there was someone that would take him on, and it just at this time of the year, it didn't materialize.
Excellent. Dave Nonis, former general manager of the Canucks, Toronto Maple Leafs, joining us here in episode 17 of the Ray and Dregs podcast. See, it wasn't that hard, was it, Dave? I mean, it might get harder moving forward, but this wasn't bad, was it?
No, I've had a lot worse.
Yeah. All
right, thanks, David. Thanks for joining us. We'll check in a week or two.
Sounds good. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for tuning into our YouTube channel. And while you're here, why don't you do us a solid? Hit like and subscribe.
Yeah, you'll get access to all the latest uploads. You can stay updated on the latest news and interviews from the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast.
It only takes a couple of seconds. And from what I'm told, it helps with our algorithm thingamajig. Anyway, yes. We appreciate the support.